listening to The Gender Rebels.
I'm Kathleen, a cis woman and ally.
And I'm Faith, a trans woman.
Gender Rebels is a question and answer podcast that explores life outside the gender binary.
A big thanks to our Patreon supporters.
If you'd like to support the show, go to patreon.com/genderrebels. Hey everyone, I'm Kath.
And I am Faith.
Today we have a special guest. We have Theresa Thorn with us. She is a podcaster and an author of 2 books. We are so excited to have her because we're going to talk about her second book today. Welcome, Theresa.
Yeah, welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us. So first of all, the book, which is called It Feels Good to Be Yourself. For our listeners, there's a link down below. We just adore this book. This is for little kids, and it's about gender identity. Theresa, can you tell us, why did you write this book?
Sure. I wrote this book because I have 3 children, and my oldest child, who's almost 8, identifies as a transgender girl. She socially transitioned when she was about 5. And around that time when we were going through sort of the process as a family of just talking about gender a lot and sort of just trying to understand more what she was feeling, we did use a lot of children's picture books to help us sort of facilitate those conversations in our home. This was the book that was missing for me, which was a book that could really sort of explain the concept of gender and gender identity without sort of making judgments per se as far as what's normal, what's expected, and what might get made fun of. And, you know, having 3 kids, my youngest, my toddler, was not born yet when we were having these first conversations, but my middle child was 3 at the time, and he really wanted to participate in these conversations as well. He's just always been sort of a little more like conforming in his gender expression. But he always really liked talking about gender as well. And we live in a very, thankfully, a very sort of progressive, accepting community here in our neighborhood of Los Angeles. And I knew that, you know, my daughter might face some confusion or ignorance out in the world if she were to transition. But I also had a hunch that in general, most people in our community, and I knew within my family, that she was going to be accepted no matter what. I didn't really like reading her books that conflated discussion about gender with like the assumption that somebody's going to get ostracized because it felt like a separate conversation. Like I felt like if we were going to talk about bullying, if she was going to have to deal with bullying, that would be a separate conversation. And I didn't want that to get in the way of her sort of exploring and discovering her gender identity, if that makes sense. Totally. So this book is really just, the idea behind this book is just that all kids, I think, no matter what, can benefit from having opportunities to think about gender and explore their own sense of their own gender. And so I wanted a book that would give that opportunity to kids, and also that would sort of help, you know, all parents. I mean, I'm a cisgender parent, and I know I found it helpful to have resources to be able to talk about gender with my kids. And I know a lot of parents in my community, especially once my daughter was socially transitioning and people were learning about that, a lot of parents wanted to have conversations about gender with their kids and were sort of worried if we have this conversation, like, I don't want to say the wrong thing, or how do I approach this and not mess it up? And I understand that, and I'm sensitive to that, but I think that should never stop us from having these conversations. So the book, I hoped, would give kids an opportunity to learn about gender without feeling judged about the questions they're having around their own gender, as well as help parents and teachers and counselors and other people in the community to facilitate these conversations.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think the book's really cute, and I do like the fact that it sort of talks about gender in a way where it's just like cis isn't the norm, cis isn't normal, and trans is other.
Yeah,
it's very much like here's how some people are, and that's a very cool way. It was so funny as I'm reading. I'm like, yep, this is basically what we say. This is everything. So hit all the bases. Excellent.
That's great.
And I love that you were able, you dove into the logical and biological quagmire that is non-binary or bigender, and how tricky that is even for teenagers and adults to figure out and suss out how they feel and if that changes from day to day. And you just laid it out, plain and simple. Sometimes you're both, sometimes you're neither. This is just who this person is. Moving on.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Yeah. So I have questions. First of all, it is Pride Month. We've kind of have a Pride theme going on all of our episodes this month. Do you and your family, do you have plans for Pride, or have you already done Pride stuff?
Well, this is actually the first year that my kids have been old enough to really even understand what Pride is, where we can talk about Pride a little bit in our house. I would say, and that's been fun, I would say the big thing we're doing is releasing this book.
Okay,
So we have, like I said, we have 3 young children, and my husband and I run a podcasting network, and all of the stuff that we have going on keeps us very, very busy. But this month is even busier than usual with launching this book. And so yesterday we had a reading across town, and, we were having more conversations, and we have a big trans pride flag on our front gate outside our house. My kids are, they are not crowds people. Like, they don't do very well in.
Neither are we.
Yeah, I'm 38 and I'm still not a crowd person.
Yeah, like I think there might be a year where maybe a couple of us can go to something, but I think all of us have some version of sensory processing disorder in some way. And so that's not something we're ready to venture out and do together. But yeah, this is kind of like our first year really kind of celebrating Pride, and it's been really nice so far.
Cool. Yes. Yesterday was the book signing at that big event, and how did that go?
It was really, really nice. I had never been to Children's Book World in West LA before, but if you're in the area, I highly recommend it. It's such a wonderful local bookshop. They were so incredibly supportive of the book. They told me they had already ordered many copies of it before they even knew they were going to be hosting my event. And it was really lovely. The turnout was really nice. The place felt full, and kids were super cute. So yeah, it felt like a success.
Oh, fantastic. I'm always nervous before something like that. Like, what if no one shows? And of course, people show. Like, they're going to come to the event, but it's still leading up to it. You never know. Yeah,
well, and our community is more on the east side of LA, and I think it's really hard to get people in LA to go to things regardless. But like across town, like I felt like even just getting my family over there felt like huge, and we were the center of the event, so that did worry me. But
we probably have to be there.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully people did turn out, so I'm very grateful.
Awesome.
So this is a question basically for other people who are maybe listening, but how do you know when your kid is really trans? Like, how do you suss that out? Because kids are kids. 4-year-old, 3-year-old. I knew when I was about 3 or 4 years old. Some of my earliest memories involve gender dysphoria, but I don't. I would wonder, like, sometimes kids are dragons, and sometimes they want to be a truck. And how do you really know? How do you figure out, and what would you say to parents who are trying to figure that out?
Yeah, I mean it's such a big question. I actually think this might sound weird. I don't think it's our job to know.
Okay.
I don't think you ever know. And one thing that helped me when my daughter Gracie was first beginning to say around the age of 4 that she felt like a girl, or she wanted people to think she was a girl, or different things like that. One thing that was hard for me was that question of like, well, should I listen to her? Like, should I say like, okay, then you're a girl? That's almost too easy. I can't just like let her be a girl. She has to like really kind of prove it somehow. Like, I wasn't thinking that I wasn't thinking that consciously, but what that was actually what was going on in my brain. It didn't occur to me at first that I could just accept that at face value. Like, okay, that's how she feels. She's saying that, so that's how she feels. I think that a lot of kids are experimenting and questioning and trying things out, and I think it's okay. I think as adults and as parents, maybe in particular, it's really hard to live with uncertainty around things. Like, we feel like we need to know what's going on so that we can help our kids with the situation and like take steps. Like, we need to like know and like decide. And I think being in that place of not knowing is like one of the hardest things. But I actually think that when we let go of the idea that like we need to have the answer, or we need our kid to like do some definitive action that shows whether they are trans or not, like when we let go of that stuff, that's when things can happen. Like, that's when our kids can really just be themselves and have the space to really find out who it is they are. I mean, when my daughter first socially transitioned, I will be 100% honest with you and tell you I did not really think that she was trans. Like, I was not like, okay, I've been convinced, now you may socially transition. What I did was, because I'm cisgender, and I wasn't against her being trans, I just didn't understand it. So it was like, I knew trans people existed, and I knew trans people in real life, and I just didn't know what that would look like in my family, and I thought I had a boy. So in my mind, this kid had been a boy since the time this kid was in my body. Like, it took me some time to get used to it. But so when she socially transitioned, it was more about me accepting that I was going to let her do what felt good to her, what felt comfortable to her, and what she was asking for. And so I thought to myself, well, I had done enough reading and educating myself by that point that I knew I couldn't like make her trans by doing anything. I couldn't make her not trans. I couldn't change her gender identity. And so that was very freeing to me to figure that out. And once I knew that I couldn't change her gender identity, I was able to let go and let her take the lead a bit more. And I thought to myself, well, maybe this is who she is, and like for the long term, or maybe this is part of her journey. Maybe this is something she needs to go through as a person. I don't know where this is going, but I'm not going to stop it. Like, I'm not going to hurt her in that way. I'm not going to tell her that she isn't something that she's saying that she is. I'm just going to trust her. And that was more than 2 years ago. That was a long time ago, and she's been a girl ever since. So like now it's like
sticking with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like easy for me to say that she's trans now because she's been saying this for so long, and she's been a girl in our lives for so long. We're really used to the idea that she's a girl, and she also says I'm like she identifies that way. That's what she says about herself, But at the time, my husband and I kind of went back and forth for a little while whether when we were talking about her, we sometimes would say gender nonconforming or gender expansive or gender creative. We just didn't really. And I just think it's fine to let your kid lead the way. Like, you can't, as long as you're showing them that whoever they are, you accept them and you love them. And if they change again, that's okay. Like, you can't screw it up.
That's awesome. That is so great. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners right now, and they tend to be teens, 20s, all the way up to their 60s. I bet they're like, why couldn't she have been my mom? Why couldn't that just have been the way it was?
I have to say, I get a little jealous when I see like kids whose parents, like, we have this conversation now, and you can be 5 and talk to your family about it, and it's like, families like yours are helping to make this normal, whereas like I grew up in the early 80s and like everyone was too busy watching the A-Team or something to like
absolutely
have this conversation. No, we're gonna go see E.T. again.
So A-Team and E.T. were the problem is what you're saying. Okay.
That was it. That was the only problem.
What was the most surprising thing about learning this about your daughter and working with the schools or family or friends or doctors? What surprised you other than the big main surprise?
I think for now, my answer will probably change as time goes on. But she's 7.5, and like we're nowhere near puberty yet, and she's just a kid. And I guess the surprise for now is just how not big of a deal it is right now in our lives. I totally get how much of a bubble we're in, and I'm very grateful for that bubble, but it just doesn't come up that much. It was never catastrophic, and it was not a thing. It's not a thing that I feel I need to go around explaining. Like, it's almost like my kid, I wrote about this for Mother Magazine, but it's like there's so many things about my kids. Like, all my kids are so different and have all these things about them, and this is just like one thing about Gracie. You know what I mean? It's not even. There's so many other things that are like, you know what I mean? It's I guess the surprise right now is how not a big deal it is right now.
That makes me so happy to hear.
It does. That was actually one of my big surprises about transition. It was like the lead up to it was so horrifying, and then once I transitioned, I was like, "This is easy.
No big deal."
Got the hang of it.
Since your trans child is your oldest, when you had at least the middle one, the infant obviously still hasn't probably been able to tell us much about who they are yet, but for the middle one, was it suddenly like, oh, this is a cis kid now?
Kind of. Well, actually, so the first 2 characters that you meet in the book are based off of my daughter and my middle child, son, and it really happened like that with my middle child when he was 3.5, and we were kind of going through my daughter's social transition, and he was experiencing all of that, and there was a day where he wanted to wear a skirt to school, and I was like, do it. Like, I was just like so over all of, like, I'd been so apprehensive about all the stuff with Grace, and like, just kind of like nervous, sick to my stomach for like weeks about what are people thinking and how do I talk about this, and all that stuff. And like, by the time my son was saying like, I want to wear a skirt to school, I was like, yeah, why not? Wear that skirt to school. Let's just whatever, like, I'm just so over all this stuff. And he wore a skirt, and by the time I picked him up from preschool that day, he was like, I don't like wearing this skirt. I'm a boy. I like being a boy. And he was just like wanted to take, like, it was like his own little like coming out thing. Like, he had this, and like, again, boys can totally wear skirts. I'm not trying to like sit here saying like, because of the skirt thing, that's how we know. It's just like it was like an illustrative example. Like, and he around that time multiple times would tell us like, I'm a boy, I'm a cisgender boy, I'm a boy. And that's been consistent. And you know what? If he changes his mind, that's fine too. But because that's how he identifies right now, and he's 5.5 now, that's what we go with as well. We go with his lead. So yeah,
you go with what he
That's
tells
perfect.
you.
Yeah.
And then the toddler, he's 2, and he just told me yesterday that he's a boy. So I was like, okay, you're a boy. Okay, cool.
I love that that's just a normal conversation to have in your house. I can't get over how happy that makes me.
Yeah.
Well, they are like, it is like around a lot because of the book right now. Like it's coming up a lot right now.
Totally.
It's not always like this, but yeah.
Yeah. So you know a lot about what a trans kid goes through, at least with starting out and talking to the schools and the social transition and everything.
What would you tell another parent who might be struggling with this question and who may not have quite as awesome and relaxed an attitude about their kid's gender presentation?
I mean, it's hard because, like, I am who I am because of, like, my experiences growing up and where I'm from. And I know that for a lot of parents, it's a really hard thing. And so I don't want to diminish that those like feelings that are very real for people that are formed based on the way we're raised, like truly these things are really part of what we've been told from the time we're tiny, so it's really in us. And I think it can be really hard. So I feel a little uncomfortable being like, just relax, it'll be great. Because I also know that depending on where you live and depending on if you're parenting with a partner and their feelings about it, depending on your family, I mean, there's a lot of factors. And I think there's places where you could be, communities you could be in, where this could be really, really scary. Like, it's not even about not wanting to support your kid, but this can be a truly scary thing. So I definitely don't want to minimize that. I think the main thing I would say is just the thing that really helped me kind of in the early days of Gracie expressing her gender to us, which was when I came to understand that, my ability to affect this situation is limited to how I show my child that I love them. Like, my job is not to fix my kid's gender for the world. It is not to fix my kid's gender for her. It is not to try to figure it out or make it fit in a certain thing or anything. It's like, really, my job is really to like love my kid and like let that sort of form everything else that I do.
Yeah.
And that I think in some ways that's freeing too, because I think sometimes as parents we think, hey, like I need to like solve this problem for my kid. Like my kid doesn't understand how bad this could be. So I'm in charge of like helping them, And like, yeah, we're kind of in charge of helping our kids, but there's only like so much that's in our control. Do you know what I mean? So when we sit back and kind of think about like, what can I actually control? I think in a way it's a little bit freeing, because the thing we can control is like showing our kids that we love them and that we accept them and that we're going to have their back no matter what.
Absolutely. Wow. It's so great.
It is.
All right. I think we're about ready to wrap up. I can ask one last question. That's another parenting advice one.
Cool.
This is has to do with a topic we'd addressed in the past, which is a parent who is trans. So once again, we're talking about adults who are transgender and working with their kids. We had a 2-part episode. There's a link down below if anyone hasn't listened to it. But essentially the one that really stumped us was the part where you might have to ask your kid to keep a secret. Sort of like, this is something that Daddy's doing at home for now, but don't tell anyone at school about Daddy's dresses.
Mm-hmm.
Is that even a thing you can ask a kid to do? 'Cause it's so weird for us to put that in the show.
Yeah, that's so hard. I personally think like most kids can't keep a secret.
Exactly.
Like kids of really any age. I mean, a lot of adults can't keep secrets. I mean, think about it. But I think especially young kids, who just, it's not even so much that they can't understand why the secret is important, because I think a lot of them could understand. I think it's just like the physical developmental ability to not tell that secret is really tough. Like that, like whether they can actually do it, like physically, it's not even like their willpower. It's like, can their brain stop this information from coming out their mouth?
Sort of impulse control.
It's really, really tough. And then I think hand in hand with that is just the pressure that could add. I mean, like, I think there's probably a way, especially with a little bit of an older kid, and especially if they have like a trusted play therapist that they see every week, and they have like a lot of support around that that process that's happening at home, so that they know, like, look, this isn't just like all on my shoulders to keep a secret. Like there's other people besides my parents that I can talk to about this. Like I feel like there's a way you could do it, but just in general, I would say I think it might be too big of an ask.
No,
Makes
you're probably
sense.
right. Yeah, play it safe and don't come out to your kid until you're ready to be full time.
Yeah.
No, I think you're right.
So, where can our listeners buy this fun new book? And the title is "It Feels Good to Be Yourself."
Yeah, It Feels Good to Be Yourself, a book about gender identity, and it's available everywhere books are sold. So you can get it on Amazon, you can get it at Target, you can get it at a local store, at an indie. My website is theresathorn.com. You can also check out my podcast, One Bad Mother.
Link down below. It is hilarious. You guys will love it.
Check out the book. I'm super excited about the book, and I just have to add the illustrator of the book, a non-binary transgender artist named Noah Greenye, who did an absolutely, I mean, I don't even have words to describe how much I love the illustrations for this book.
It's so gorgeous.
It's really cute.
So you can check out their illustrations also and follow them on Instagram if you want. They have a really great Instagram. It's at ngreenye, which is NGRIGNI. And yeah, you won't be disappointed.
Yes. And for our listeners, there are links to all of these things in our show notes. Theresa, thank you so much for talking with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I loved your questions, and it was really enjoyable speaking with you both.
This was fun.
Perfect. Thank you. And for all our listeners, do check out this book. It's really great. And if you're trying to explain these difficult, often confusing for adults concepts to kids, this is a great resource.
This is a good place to start. Yeah. All right. Thanks again, Theresa. You have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Okay. All right. You too. Bye.
Bye.
If you've enjoyed this episode and want to help us keep making more great content, go to patreon.com/genderrebels.
We have many different levels of support and lots of great rewards,
including drinks with the Gender Rebels at Stonewall.
Please leave a 5-star review on iTunes. That makes it easier for other people to find us.
And send your questions to questions@genderrebels.com or find us on Twitter @TheGenderRebels.
Music for The Gender Rebels is by Jasper the Colossal. Follow the link down below or download them on iTunes today.
And for all our episodes, visit genderrebels.com.
Gender Rebels is a Comeback Sync production, copyright 2019. All rights reserved.
And to all you gender rebels out there, keep rebelling.
Bye.
Bye.